Hello, fifth graders. So before we get into actually multiplying whole numbers, multi-digit whole numbers, we're going to talk about first estimating products. Now remember, the word product stands for the answer to a multiplication problem. So again, I posed this question just like when we were adding and subtracting decimals. I asked you guys, why do we estimate? Okay, we estimate to check the reasonableness of our answer. Okay. The reason why we do that is because we want to see if our answer makes reasonableness, if our answer makes sense. Okay, so for example, if we get the answer of 2,500, but then we estimated and we got 200, something seems a little off and our answer may not be correct. So we estimate to check the reasonableness of our answer. So how we estimate when we're multiplying whole numbers is to round each addend. Now that's my bad. It's not an addend actually. Okay, on yours it may be different. I think it's actually round each factor. Okay, so we round each factor to the nearest either tens or hundreds place. Okay, and the reason why we do that, it basically just depends on what is easier to do in our head. Okay, basically it says whichever place value is the greatest in your number. So for example, this first example, we have 525. Okay, well the hundreds place is my greatest place value, so I'm going to round to the hundreds place. Okay, so I find my place, I look next door. Okay, that 2 tells me to keep it, and the 5 stays a 5. And so 525 rounded to the nearest 100 is 500. That's a nice, easy number, okay? And then 31, that only goes to the tens place. So I'm going to round to the nearest tens. Okay, so I look at my tens place, that's the 3. And then I look next door to the 1, okay? And that 1 tells me to keep the 3 as it is, so that becomes 30. Okay, and now 500 times 30 is really easy to do in our heads because I have 5 and I have 3. And that's a basic fact. 5 times 3 is 15. And then I add how many zeros? Well, there's 3 zeros in total, so 3 zeros. Okay, and my estimate is going to be around 15,000. All right, so let's look at the next one. Again, we have 380. That's in the hundreds place, so you're going to round to the nearest 100. You look at the hundreds place, which is the 3. And then we look next door. That's the 8. That 8 bumps up my 3 to a 4, so it becomes 400. 690 is also in the hundreds place. Okay, so you look at the 6 in the hundreds place, and then you look next door. That 9 tells us to bump that 6 to a 7, so it becomes 700. Okay, and again, in this thing, if you round it and you can't do it in your head, re-round it and make it easier to do in your head. So I see the 4 and I see the 7. I know 7 times 4 is 28. And then I have 4 zeros in total, so I would add 4 zeros to my answer. Okay, so my final answer would be 280,000. And then lastly, we have 210. Okay, that's in the hundreds place. So we look at our 2, which is in the hundreds. Look next door to our 1. The 1 tells us to keep the 2 as it is, and it becomes 200. And 733, it's also in the hundreds. So we look at the 7 in the hundreds place. Okay, and then we look at our 3 next door. The 3 tells us to keep the 7 the same again, and it becomes 700. And again, our basic fact in this problem is 7 times 2, okay? And we know that is 14. And then there are 4 zeros total, so it's 140,000. All right, so all we're doing is just estimating today, because when we estimate before we actually solve it, when we get our final answer, we can see if we kept our place values the same and we actually have a close actual answer. Now, when we're also estimating, we're going to see if our estimate is either an overestimate or an underestimate. Okay, so let's look at this first example, 421 times 705. They're both in the hundreds place, so we're going to round to the nearest hundred. So find your place, look next door. 421 becomes 400. Same thing with 705. Find your place, look next door. That 0 tells the 7 to stay. It becomes 700. So now I have 400 times 700. My basic fact is 4 times 7. Okay, 4 times 7 is 28, and we have 4 zeros. Now, this is where I want you to see if it's an overestimate or an underestimate. So my final estimate is either an over or underestimate because both estimates are what than the actual numbers. So look at the estimates 400 and 700. Did we round down or did we round up for both of them? Well, we rounded down for both of them. So if we round down for both of your numbers, well then your estimate is going to be less than your actual one because you rounded down. So my final estimate is then, what would mean less would be an underestimate, okay? Because both estimates are less than the actual numbers. All right? So it's an underestimate if both estimates are less than the actual numbers we started with. So now let's look at the next example. We have 367 times 89. So 367 is the hundreds place. So we find our hundreds, which is the 3. We look next door, which is the 6. That 6 tells us to bump up that 307 to 400. And then 89, okay, is in the tens place. So we round to the nearest 10. We look at that 8. We look next door to the 9. The 9 also tells us to bump the 8 to a 90. Okay, so our basic fact is 4 times 9, which is 36. And then we have 3 zeros total, so 1, 2, 3. Now, this time, did we round both of our factors up or did we round both of our factors down? Well, we rounded both of them up. So my final estimate isn't an under anymore, it's an overestimate. All right, it's an overestimate because both estimates are greater than the actual numbers. All right, so if both estimates are greater than the actual numbers, it's an overestimate. So let's look at this last problem. 34, what does 34 round to if it's in the tens? The nearest tens would be 30. 115, what does 115 round to? The nearest hundred would be 100. So 3 times 1 is our basic fact. Well, 3 times 1 is 3. And then we have 3 zeros. So did we round both of our numbers down or both of our numbers up? We rounded both of our numbers down. So it is an underestimate because both estimates are less than the actual numbers. All right. Now you may be thinking, well, Mr. Rothstein, what if one you round up and then the other one you round down? And that's a really good question. Okay. And it's kind of hard to tell at that point if it's an over or underestimate because you do one for one and one for the other. All right. But you can definitely tell if you always round both of the factors up, it's going to be an overestimate, which means it's greater than the actual answer. And if you round both of the numbers down or both of the factors down, you know it's going to be an underestimate or less than the actual answer. All right, so today, basically what you're doing is just practicing estimation. And remember, we estimate to check the reasonableness of our answers. All right, so you're going to be rounding and estimating a lot before you actually find your total and final products because you want to see if you're close to the actual answer. All right, so the Google form attached to this Edpuzzle is just going to have some more practice for you guys. And please email me if you do have any questions and have a wonderful